Hello, this is Mike Isbitsky, Technical Evangelist with Salt Security, and welcome to another episode of MythBusters API Edition. The goal of this series is to dive into some security trends that have resulted in myths for API security. Just a refresher, the format of these, we're going to be diving into the approach or technology. What does that mean? What's the baseline for that? Just to get everybody on the same page as far as understanding. And then we're going to talk about why that given approach or technology just isn't enough for API security, which results in this myth. Identity and access management, API gateways, and WAFs are enough. Tried and true mechanisms, right? We see these commonly in most enterprise architectures. There's reasons for that. So let's kind of dive in. Well, what do these things mean and why are they myths? I like to refer to these mechanisms as the application traffic cops. Right? What are they doing? Well, a few things, right? Identity and access management, it is critical for enforcing authentication and authorization, not just of your user identities, which might include employees and customers, but also machine identities, right? This becomes really critical as you start getting into the world of DevOps and cloud native design, as well as automation. There's a lot of different machine identities that need to connect to each other, and you need to authenticate and authorize those connections. API gateways, very common, often paired with API management. Gateways themselves, really they are mediators, right? Typically they're there to provide visibility and observability of your APIs, as well as to enforce access controls, often paired with identity and access management systems. But that API management piece is kind of a layer on top of the gateways. So really common in modern design patterns, very useful for productizing and monetizing APIs. They offer developer and partner self-service portals as well, right? So as you want to grow adoption of your APIs, typically API management is the thing you start looking at to kind of gain adoption, grow that, productize it, generate more revenue for the company, kind of increase consumption of your APIs, right? It's a legitimate business need. And web app firewalls aid in broad exploit detection for web application traffic. Really commonly used. Mod security is kind of a very popular open source engine. Actually forms the basis of a lot of commercial offerings, but useful, right, for kind of catching all types of web application layer exploitable conditions. But there's a problem there, right? Let's dig a layer deeper as to why these are myths. The first is, they rely on proxying as a technique, right? Because they are network-based mechanisms. Identity and access management is usually paired with some type of proxy to authenticate and authorize the connection. But the issue with proxies is they slow API communication. And this becomes a problem as you start getting into microservices architecture, or thinking about kind of scalability of your APIs. And even if you are in the world of cloud and increased elasticity and unlimited infrastructure, there's still a cost to that, right? You have to spin up more compute to support it, but you still might actually slow down your API communications, even if it is fully powered by the cloud. So it's kind of an anti-pattern, right? You don't want too many proxies in your enterprise architecture. It creates a lot of problems. The other problem is they're very dependent on signatures and rules for attack detection, right? They're only going to know about the things they've been told to look for. Typically, those are, in the case of an API gateway with threat protection filters, they're extremely basic. Might look for known malicious character sets that would be used in injection attacks, like a single tick or an angle bracket. Useful for catching some types of cross-site scripting or SQL injection. WAFs will go further, right? They'll kind of look for More exploitable conditions in commercial software packages and maybe some open source software packages like WordPress or Drupal. But if you're in the world of creating custom applications and custom APIs, your code's going to look probably substantially different from those commercial vendors and even the open source creators, right? It's your unique logic and your ways of designing things. So they're not going to have these rule sets to understand what a given transaction should look like, but they are also only focused on that transaction or that given message, right? A lot of API attacks are a result of abuse of business logic, and it occurs over a sequence. It's not just one message that needs to be inspected. So, signatures and rules, really big downside of, API gateways and WAFs. They're limited, right? And the gateway might not even be maintained, even less so than the WAF. And very commonly we hear from organizations that, maintaining WAFs, and typically that translates to who's going to write all the rule sets and tune the WAF for, a given application and API, it falls by the wayside, right? So the WAF kind of gets those generic rule sets, very low value. I was talking about kind of those business logic attacks, right? The reality is your APIs are the pathways to your organization's functionality and data, right? And abuse patterns don't follow well-defined patterns that work well with those message filtering type approaches. Or you can create a signature or rule, right? You have to look at a sequence of transactions over time. What does that normal baseline look like? How is it anomalous now? Abuse patterns don't follow these kind of general traffic pattern, right? It looks very different from one business to the next, across verticals, and then how somebody, an attacker, is going to abuse that. So very different from exploitable conditions where a signature or a rule set and a WAF can be effective. We've also seen cases where API management itself can be exploitable. And I talked about how that management layer is often paired with self-service portals. That is a type of web application that's been known to be vulnerable with some vendors. And then there's also, typically database backend components to store policies, which then need to be pushed out to API gateways. That backend database can also be vulnerable. So typically we see, API management is actually front-ended itself by a web app firewall. But again, not very versed in the language of APIs. And finally, attackers bypass access controls. And this is the, kind of the myth with identity and access management. Yes, it is core to all security domains and certainly API security. The problem is, attackers are crafty. An authenticated and authorized API endpoint is not the end of the day, right? They're going to find ways to piggyback on an authenticated session, trick a user to give them authenticated context. They'll harvest authentication keys, API keys, authentication tokens, cookies, session values, whatever it may be that's going to get you that authenticated context in the API. They will harvest that, right? And that can be from traffic. It can be from the user's endpoint device. If you're embedding things in application code, that front end, they'll also harvest that. Thank you for watching another episode of MythBusters API Edition. Please check the Salt Security website for more blog articles, white papers, case studies, video content, much more. We're going to be producing a lot of content of written form and video form, hopefully physical events in the near future. As always, reach out to us with any questions, and certainly if you'd like a demo of the Salt Security API protection platform. Again, this is Mike Isbitsky. Thank you for watching.